Welcome to Life Stories, where a 5-year-old's whisper saves a life, and a mother learns the people closest to her may be the ones holding the match. What if everything you believed about love, trust, and family was built on a lie? What if the home you thought was safe was the very trap set to destroy you? In today's story, we follow a woman whose quiet suburban life unravels overnight, revealing secrets buried beneath smiles, routines, and Sunday morning breakfasts. It's a story of betrayal so personal it burns, and of a bond so strong it survives the fire. This isn't just about survival, it's about the courage to see the truth, even when it comes from the smallest voice in the room. Let's begin. In the quiet neighborhood of Crestwood, New York, nestled between rows of maple-lined streets and houses that whispered suburban dreams, the Bennett home stood still and pristine. From the outside, it was a portrait of contentment. A white picket fence, a modest two-story frame with flower beds always in bloom, and soft jazz occasionally drifting from the living room on Saturday mornings. But inside, behind drawn curtains and the hum of domestic rituals, something had begun to quietly rot. Claire Bennett moved through her kitchen with practiced grace. The aroma of fresh brewed coffee mingled with sizzling bacon, sunlight pooling gently on the tile floor. She poured orange juice for her 5-year-old son Lucas, who sat cross-legged on the carpeted floor, deep in a world of dinosaurs. Across the room, her husband Ryan, crisp in his tailored gray suit, knelt beside their son, pretending to struggle with his socks. "Race you," Ryan said with a playful grin, and Lucas giggled as he yanked his socks up. Claire smiled, holding that moment in her heart like a fragile bubble. For 7 years, mornings like this had been her haven. Quiet, warm, routine. She had given up her marketing job to be home full-time when Lucas was born, a decision she never regretted. Ryan provided, she nurtured, and their son grew in a world seemingly untouched by pain. But lately, she'd sensed something. Not a storm, no, more like a pressure drop. A silence too calculated, a distance that didn't have a name, but a scent. And it wasn't hers. Ryan had begun coming home later. When she asked, he offered vague replies about meetings and market volatility. He was a financial analyst. Stress came with the job. But Claire couldn't ignore how tightly he clutched his phone now, how he stepped out mid-dinner to take emergency calls, how the air around him held a fragrance she didn't wear, something floral, unfamiliar, expensive. She told herself it was nothing. She lied to herself. But the truth had already started to fray the edges of her peace. As they drove to the train station that morning, Lucas unusually quiet in the back seat. Ryan stared at his phone, fingers twitching as though expecting bad news. Claire watched him from the corner of her eye. He hadn't kissed her goodbye that morning. Just a wave. Mechanical. Distracted. When he stepped out of the car and disappeared into the station crowd, something in her chest clenched. It was small, like a gasp, but it hurt. "Mommy?" Lucas's voice broke the silence. Claire looked in the rearview mirror. "Yes, sweetheart." "I don't want to go home today." Her brow furrowed. "Why not?" Lucas looked down at the dinosaur in his hands. "It's just Daddy said something bad last night. On the phone." Claire's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" Lucas hesitated, then whispered, "He said, come right after they leave in the morning. Make sure it goes right this time." And I heard Grandma's voice. Claire pulled the car over slowly. Her fingers were ice. Evelyn, Ryan's mother. Elegant, poised, always composed, with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had visited just last week, unannounced, and spent an hour praising Ryan while asking subtly if Claire was still making sure things were smooth at home. The questions had been disguised as concern, but they'd felt like probes, judgments. Now Lucas's words opened a door Claire hadn't known she'd locked. "Are you sure, Lucas?" He nodded solemnly. It felt scary. Instead of driving home, Claire parked by a nearby coffee shop. Holding her son's hand, they walked the remaining blocks in silence, hearts racing. At the corner of their street, they hid behind a wide oak and watched their house. 10 minutes passed. Then a red sedan rolled up and stopped in front of the Bennett home. Claire froze. Evelyn stepped out, her movements elegant and deliberate, just as always. In her hand, a small metallic object. Keys. Claire's breath caught. Evelyn looked around. Satisfied she was alone, she unlocked the door and slipped inside. Claire's heart pounded in her ears. Minutes passed. Then, through the living room window, an orange flicker. Not a lamp. Fire. Smoke followed. Claire grabbed her phone with shaking hands. 911, there's a fire. 42 Ridgeview Lane. Please, hurry. She pulled Lucas close, his small body trembling, his eyes wide. You saved us, she whispered, her voice cracking. You saved both of us. Could you forgive the one you love if they tried to destroy you? When a child sees what adults choose to ignore, who do we trust? As the sirens grew louder and the flames reached higher, Claire realized the morning's warmth had been a lie, and the truth was only beginning to burn its way to the surface. The next revelation would shatter more than just glass and wood. The smell of smoke still clung to Claire's coat when she sat in the small, sterile interview room at the Crestwood Police Department. Her hands trembled as she gripped a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, untouched. Across from her, Detective Harris, mid-50s, tired eyes, but with the stillness of a man who'd seen too much, flipped open his notebook slowly, giving her time. Take your time, Mrs. Bennett, he said. We just need to know exactly what happened this morning. Claire's voice was calm, almost unnaturally so. It was as if shock had built a dam around her, holding back the storm she could feel rising beneath her skin. She recounted everything: Lucas's warning, the drive, Evelyn's arrival, the fire, the call to 911. She tried to keep her voice steady, but when she spoke Evelyn's name, it cracked. My son. He heard her voice. On the phone. With Ryan. Her gaze fell to the scratched table between them. They planned it. Together. Detective Harris nodded slowly, scribbling a note. And you're sure your husband knew what she was doing? Claire hesitated. Images of Ryan flashed in her mind. His distracted morning glances, the missed goodnight kisses, the new detachment like he'd already stepped out of their lives. The man she had loved for nearly a decade had started to feel like a stranger. Yes, she said finally, though it felt like pulling her own breath through broken glass. 2 hours later, as she sat numbly in the hallway outside the main office, Claire saw him. Ryan, flanked by 2 officers, handcuffed. His face was pale, lips tight, eyes wide in disbelief. Their eyes met. Claire stood slowly. Ryan stopped walking. Claire, please, he said, voice thin, desperate. Let me explain. The officers looked at each other, then allowed him a few feet of space. Claire took one step closer. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask why. But all that came out was, how could you? He looked shattered, broken in a way she had never seen. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. You weren't supposed to be home. You never are after drop-off. I thought it would be safe. Safe? She hissed, her composure snapping. You set our house on fire. With your mother. You let your son live in a house you planned to burn. Do you hear how insane that sounds? He blinked, eyes glassy. I was drowning, Claire. The debt, it's over 200 grand. I tried to fix it. I tried to keep it together. The fire insurance. It was the only way. Claire stared at him like he was someone she had once known in another life. You tried to murder us to fix it? I didn't think it through, he muttered. I just thought, if I could erase it all, we could start over. Clean. Her voice dropped to a whisper, cutting deeper than any scream. You were never planning to rebuild with me. You wanted the insurance. You wanted the money, but you forgot the most important part. Lucas was watching. He heard everything. He saved us. Ryan's face crumbled, guilt folding him in. As the officers led him away, Claire leaned against the wall, breathing hard, her palms pressed to her stomach to keep the nausea from rising. Later, back at the station, Detective Harris gave her more than she was ready for. Ryan's debt had started with online poker, then the casinos in Yonkers, Atlantic City. He'd borrowed from private lenders, dangerous ones. Evelyn, once a picture of icy composure, had gone to the fireside armed with a lighter, gasoline in a discreet bottle, and the spare key Claire had forgotten she even gave her years ago. The plan was simple. Weekday morning, empty house, clean fire, fast payout. Evelyn had agreed to help him, convinced that saving her son from financial ruin was worth any cost. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room of a neighbor's house, Lucas asleep beside her, his small hand resting on hers. She watched the shadows shift on the ceiling and thought about how many times she'd told herself she was imagining things. That love was enough. That loyalty was safety. But love wasn't supposed to mean silence. Loyalty wasn't supposed to look like blindness. By morning, the house was declared uninhabitable. Evelyn was in custody. Ryan was being processed. Lucas, blissfully unaware of the full truth, asked, "Mommy, when can we go home?" Claire brushed the hair from his forehead. "We're going to find a new home," she said. "A better one that's real." That afternoon, the fire marshal confirmed the fire had been deliberate. The insurance company froze all payouts, and that evening, Claire received a letter. Anonymous, untraceable, threatening. A demand for payment. She stared at it in disbelief. It wasn't over. Ryan hadn't just gambled with money. He'd gambled with their lives, and now his debts had come looking for her. When the ones you trust put a price on your life, how do you rebuild from betrayal that deep? Claire thought the worst was behind her, but in truth, it was only beginning. What she uncovers next will shake everything she thought she understood about family, loyalty, and survival. The letter sat on the kitchen counter like a silent threat, its black ink seeping into Claire's mind long after she folded it back into the envelope. It had no return address, no name, just a demand for payment. $50,000 in cash within 2 weeks, or things will get worse. She knew what it meant. Ryan's debts had tentacles, and even with him in custody, those he owed hadn't forgotten or forgiven. She had nothing left of the life they'd built. The house was gone, the insurance frozen, her bank account modest at best. She'd borrowed time, borrowed peace. Now reality had come collecting. The police filed the letter into evidence, but Detective Harris warned her quietly. "These people don't care that he's locked up. They want their money, and they're watching you." That night, Claire sat in the silence of her borrowed guest room while Lucas slept curled beside her. She watched him breathe, lashes resting on flushed cheeks. His favorite dinosaur still clutched in one small hand. He looked so peaceful, untouched by the horror he'd brushed against. But Claire knew better. Even at 5, he had seen too much. She wouldn't let the darkness touch him again. She made a decision. 3 days later, she and Lucas left Crestwood behind. No dramatic goodbyes, no farewell notes, just a quiet morning, a packed duffel bag, and a rented car. Claire drove north, past the bridges and city lights, through winding mountain roads until the sky opened up over wide Vermont hills. In a small town called Ashgrove, she found a weathered house on the edge of a wildflower field. Cheap, quiet, and anonymous. It needed work, and so did she. Claire took a job answering phones at a local real estate office. It was humble, but the routine soothed her. She cleaned houses on weekends, saved every cent, and built a life out of nothing but instinct and will. Lucas enrolled in the small public school, made fast friends, and never once asked when they'd go back. Maybe he understood, in his own way, that they never could. The nightmares faded slowly. Sometimes Claire would wake in the dark, heart pounding, sure she heard Evelyn's voice or saw smoke curling under a doorframe. But every morning the sun rose over the hills, and Lucas climbed into bed beside her with bedhead and sleepy laughter. That, she told herself, was healing. Months passed. Seasons turned. She finalized the divorce, returned to her maiden name, and buried the Bennett surname like a bad memory. Evelyn pled guilty and received a reduced sentence. Ryan, though, he got 8 years. The trial had been quick. Claire didn't attend. She didn't need to see him in shackles to know he was gone. The letter, though, it haunted her. She never received another one. Whether the people behind it believed she had nothing to offer, or whether Ryan had finally given them something from behind bars, she never found out. But even silence can feel like suspense. It kept her cautious, vigilant. One rainy March afternoon, almost a year since the fire, Claire found Lucas sitting by the window, drawing. The page showed a house surrounded by hills, a smiling boy, and a woman holding his hand. Above them, in a child's handwriting, the words, "New home, safe." Her breath caught in her throat. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Lucas held up the page proudly. "Us, but not from before, from now." She knelt beside him, tracing the lines with her eyes. "Are you happy here?" He nodded. "It's quiet, and you smile more now." Claire wrapped her arms around him and held him for a long time, and when he pulled back, he whispered something that stilled her heart. "Do you think Daddy loved us, even a little?" She looked into her son's eyes, so young, but filled with a depth no child should carry. Her first instinct was to lie, to shield him, but they had survived because of truth, not fantasy. I think Daddy was lost, she said softly. And when people are lost, sometimes they hurt the ones they love the most. But that doesn't mean you weren't worth loving. Lucas didn't reply. He just rested his head against her shoulder. That night, Claire lit a single candle on the windowsill, not for mourning, but as a quiet promise to herself that whatever came next, fear, hope, love, or loss, she would meet it on her terms, not as someone's wife, not as someone's victim, but as a mother, a fighter, and a woman who had already faced fire and lived to rebuild from ash. 2 years later, Lucas stood in front of his second-grade class for a school project. My hero, he said, gripping his paper, is my mom. She didn't save me with superpowers. She saved me by listening, and when everyone else gave up, she didn't. That's stronger than flying. Claire watched from the back of the classroom, tears in her eyes, and for the first time in years, they weren't from pain. What part of Claire's journey moved you the most, and how would you have handled her choices differently? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. We'd love to know where you're watching from. What country are you in? If you felt this story deserves to be heard, share it with someone you care about. Thank you for watching Life Stories.